Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Shania. So for today's video, I thought that I would talk about a book that very recently just came out and was actually my most anticipated release of the year. I couldn't believe that this book was finally here. It was so exciting. I got this book right away at midnight. I ended up buying it on Kindle and started reading it right away, and then my copy came in the mail the next day. But that book is the new Sarah J. Maas series, Crescent City, specifically the very first book in the series, which is called House of Earth and Blood. So I ended up reading this book in about 2 days, and let me tell you, I got some thoughts on this one. I have some things that I liked a lot, and I have some things that I just disliked a lot. So I thought, why not just talk to you guys about it and kind of vent my feelings to you all and just discuss what Sarah J. Maas's new book was really like. Before we dive in, I quickly want to say that everything I'm going to be mentioning in this video is 100% spoiler free. I just want to give you guys kind of my perspective on what I was feeling in regards to this book without saying anything about the actual content or the events that happen in the book. So with that, let's just jump into the video now. So before I share my thoughts about this book, I just want to give you guys a little bit of rundown of what this book is actually about. So this is actually Sarah's very first book that's marketed as an adult book. Her other two series, A Court of Thorns and Roses and Throne of Glass, were actually marketed as young adult books. But if you guys have read them before, then you guys know that they're actually not young adult at all. If anything, they're new adult books because there's a lot of violence in them and there's a lot of smut in them too. And this book, now that it is marketed as an adult book, just kind of took it to the next level, honestly. So House of Earth and Blood is an urban fantasy, and by urban fantasy, that just means that it isn't a fantasy world, but it is also set in today's society. So there are a lot of technology advancements that are very similar to what we have currently. But like I mentioned, it is a fantasy world, so there are fantasy type creatures or beings and other type of elements that come into play that differ from what we have today in real world. In this book, we're introduced to a bunch of different characters, therefore we're in a third-person point of view, very similar to Throne of Glass. However, this book is centered around the character of Bryce Quinlan, who is in her mid-20s, and she is half fae, half human. The book kicks off with an introduction to Bryce and her best friend, Danica, who are seen as party girls. They basically go through life not really caring what other people think. They just live life to the fullest, and they go out at night, they drink, they do drugs, and are just having a good time in their mid-20s. One night, Bryce goes out and does just that. She is out with friends, she's drinking, she's dancing, and she's just having a really good time living it up. But the night comes to a close when she comes home and she finds that her closest friends have been murdered by a demon. On that very same night, we're also introduced to Hunt Athalar, who is a fallen angel that once rebelled and tried to overthrow the government that's set in place in this book, and since then he has been enslaved by the archangels and has to do all of their dirty work. We then fast forward 2 years, and the murders that occurred that night have not been solved yet, and we have Bryce, who is in a deep state of depression since her closest friends were murdered. Throughout this book, we have a bunch of secrets and mysteries that end up being divulged, and we're also introduced to so many great characters, honestly, in this book, and there's a couple in particular that I really like that I'll get into in a second. But honestly, this book is really, really great, and just want to say that right off the bat. And if you guys haven't read it, it's definitely worth it. It is a thick book. We have about 800 pages in this book. However, it's definitely worth it if you guys want a fantasy book to read. Alright, so after that explanation, let's get into what I really liked about this book. So the very first thing that I really, really enjoyed about this book was Bryce's character. I think that she is probably one of the better characters that Sarah J. Maas has ever written. Sarah always does a really good job of sending home really good messages in regards to her books, and Bryce's character is definitely one of those messages. I just love the idea of having Bryce as this party girl who everybody just seems to frown upon and doesn't take seriously, but all in all, she's one of the hardest working, most intelligent, and driven people out of any character that Sarah's ever written. Something else that I think was important in regards to Bryce's character was that Bryce really didn't know what she was going to do with her life. I think what's important about that is the fact that Bryce is, one, stressing out about it. She's worried about what she wants to do and she has no idea, but she's also got outside people that are telling her things that she should be doing, and also judging her by what she does in her free time. And she's also comparing herself to her friends and seeing how they have all this success and she doesn't have that. But with all of that going on, she's still being true to herself, and she's not caring what other people think. She's still dictating what she wants to do with herself and not letting all of those outside opinions or outside sources tell her what to do. And while all these horrible events are happening in her life and she's had these struggles that you read about throughout, she's still a badass. Like, she is a strong, independent woman, and I just really enjoyed reading about her character. I think it was probably the best experience I've had in one of Sarah's books, and if I had to compare her to another character, it honestly would be Selena Sardathian. Another thing that I really liked about this new book was the friendship that Bryce and Danica had. I think that this was one of the most pivotal points of the entire book. It's something that you're focused on. It is the main, like, overarching umbrella of the entire book, and I don't think you see that very often in regards to fantasy or romance books or in any of Sarah's other books. This is something that was like the center of attention, and I loved it. I think that Bryce and Danica's relationship was so meaningful to me just because I felt that. I felt everything that they were feeling, that Bryce was feeling. I think that Sarah really captured the best friend bond absolutely perfectly, and I think it was the best thing that she ever had in this book. Since we're already discussing the characters, the next thing I want to talk about is how much I love Sarah's writing with characters. I think that Sarah is uncontested in writing character interactions. I don't think any other author I've ever read has written the relationships, the conversations, just the all-in-all interactions between characters as well as Sarah J. Maas does. I think she does it phenomenally. I think that you can really feel their conversation, you can feel the bond, you can feel everything that each character is feeling while being in a third-person point of view. Like, you're not even in their mind, but you're still really engaging and really feeling what the characters are feeling. So the next thing that I want to discuss is the world building, which is kind of both a like and a dislike in this book, which I'll get into the dislikes later. But what I liked about it was how immersive the world building was and how Sarah really gets you to envision how this city is set up. At the very beginning of the book, you are thrown a lot of information in regards to the city and the world in general, and it's really hard to kind of process at the beginning, but when you get into the middle of the book, you kind of remember everything that happened and was said in the very beginning, and then you kind of just really start picturing everything. So I'm not gonna lie with you guys, when it comes to mysteries and like case solving type books in a fictional or fantasy type world, I usually guess pretty early on who or what happens in the book. Like, for instance, in regards to the Stalking the Jack the Ripper series by Carrie Maniscalco, those I guessed very early on, and a bunch of other books too, I guessed pretty early, and then when I find out that I was right, it kind of just lets it down for me. So when it came to this one and I found out that it was about a cold case in a sense and they were trying to solve it, I was a little bit hesitant because, one, this is something that Sarah's never done. It is something that's never had any precedence in any of her other books. So I was a little bit wary about how she was going to handle a mystery in a sense. But I have to say, you guys, I made a lot of guesses and none of my guesses were right. I don't think anybody honestly could have guessed the ending. It was so crazy. And it really shows that Sarah really thinks out her plots and her entire book and just thinks things through, and she puts a lot of work into it, and it really showed. So a couple more things that I want to touch on for things that I really enjoyed about this book is, one, of course, I think that Sarah writes really great smut, and there's some pretty good smut in here too. And I know some people really hate what she writes in regards to like sex scenes or whatever, but I personally love it. I'm always like, oh, he shook a mountain, dope. But honestly, this book was great. With smut, I think that it was good. And that's all I'm going to say about that. But the other thing that I really liked about this book too was Sarah's side characters. She's always done a really great job of writing side characters and having some sort of comedic relief, and this one is no exception. She got to use the F-bomb a hell of a lot more, so she used that to her advantage, and let me tell you, the F-bomb was being dropped like at least every single page. I swear, it was constantly being used. But anyways, her side characters are so good that I always end up falling in love with one of the side characters more so than one of the main characters. I feel like that's always happened, and that definitely happened in this book too. I absolutely love one of the characters, and he is great. His name is the same as my boyfriend's name, which is Tristan, and I just loved him. And if you guys have read it, I hope you guys love him too, because he was like such a minimal character, but like every time he talked, I loved it. He like said the F-bomb every single time, and it just made every environment, even though it was a serious environment at times, he made it so much more funny, and I loved him. So if you guys have read it, let me know your thoughts about him down below. Alright, so I think it's time that we get into the things that I disliked about this book. But before we get started with that, I just quickly want to throw a disclaimer out there that I, for one, am not trying to trash on Sarah's books. Obviously, you just heard about all the things that I really loved about it, and now I'm just going to tell you things I didn't like, because I just want to give you guys my full, honest opinion, and I just want to say that if there's something that I don't like that you guys really liked, that's okay. And I know that there's going to be something that I didn't like that you guys really, really like, and that's fine. And I hope you guys don't get mad at me for it, because that's just how I feel, and I think it's okay to have different opinions. Okay, so we're gonna start with the really big one, the one that I didn't like. And let me tell you guys, I didn't hate everything, and I think hate's a strong word. I just didn't like this character, and that character is Hunt Athalar. So Sarah J. Maas did a YouTube live stream because she ended up canceling her US and UK book tours. So she did this stream with her husband, and she was talking about Hunt's character and how she became inspired to write him. And she said that he is very similar to her character Cassian from the ACOTAR series. And I would have to say I disagree with her on that. But like, she created him, so of course if he reminds her of Cassian, then she's probably right, I'm probably wrong. But like, for me, I wasn't getting Cassian vibes from his character. If I had to compare Hunt to any of Sarah's other characters, I would say that he's most like Lorcan from the Throne of Glass series. I think that they are really similar, not just in their looks, because they both have like long black hair and dark eyes. I don't think it's just that. I think that their personality and the way they portray themselves is very similar. He was stuck in this frame of mind where he couldn't see reason past it until another character showed him that, hey, that's not how you think. And that's something that Lorcan did a lot too, was he had this one mindset, and he didn't see reason past it. He just was so trained and so stuck in his ways that he wouldn't change for the better. Another thing that I didn't really like about Hunt was I never got an emotional connection to him. You know, he laid his heart out quite a bit to Bryce and to other characters, but I never felt connected to him myself. I think one of the issues that I had in regards to not being connected to Hunt's character was that I was a little bit cautious going in. When it comes to Sarah J. Maas and her other books, if you've read them, you can't always trust her. And you can't always trust what's happening in the book or each character. You can't ever trust her. She likes to like throw you in a loop and confuse the hell out of you. So I was a little bit cautious with this guy, and I was a little bit nervous, and I was like, well, I don't want to get too emotionally invested in this guy, because what if something happens, and what if she tries to pull her bullshit on me again and I'm not prepared for it? So I think that was one of my problems, because I held myself back from getting connected to him. But I think another one of the issues is that he just didn't have a lot of the qualities that I enjoy. I don't know. It's hard for me to decide if I really did like him. Alright, so getting into the next thing that I disliked about this book, it's very similar to what I was just talking about in regards to how I was comparing characters and things that were happening to her other books. And that is that with this book, I felt like it was too much like her other books. There were a lot of things that she talked about in this book that were already been there, done that in the other books. So I was kind of annoyed with that because I'm like, Sarah, like, this is exactly like this for this reason, or this book for that reason. And I was like, I need something new and original. As I mentioned previously, the murder mystery was a new thing for Sarah, but there were so many other qualities and events that happened that were just so similar. And I know that's kind of unfair because when it comes to an author, they're gonna kind of stick with what they know. And I get that, but I just wanted something else a little bit different, because when you're reading 800 pages of a book and for half of it you're comparing it to her other books and you're not enjoying it as much because you're comparing it to other books, then like that kind of sucks. So something that I mentioned earlier that I liked but I also disliked was the world building. So I liked the way that she immersed everybody into the world in the city, but I felt like the world building drug on for a long time. And I know it's hard when it comes to a fantasy book that you really want to make sure that everything is laid out and that everybody has all the information that they need, but like literally the first 200 to 300 pages of the book is just lots of information being thrown at you, and I felt like it maybe could have been done a little bit more effectively, though I know it's difficult when you have so much information. So the last thing that I really just didn't like very much about this book was that I felt there was too much going on. Like a lot of things were going on that you kind of figure out later on all played with one another and were interwoven into making the ending, but it just was like so much going on, and it was like, well, just kind of confusing. Like, why were we talking about this and then like this? Like, what was the whole point? And the way it ended up being explained was like, okay, what? Like, there's no way that I felt we as readers would have figured that out at all. And I feel like if I was, Bryce and I was in her situation, I don't think I would have figured it out, and I would have been so confused. Alright, so those are all my thoughts in regards to the new book, Crescent City, House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. It was actually really difficult for me to explain all my thoughts without spoiling anything because I just wanted to talk about everything in the book, but I wanted to make sure that you guys knew my thoughts without, having to read the book or anything like that, and deciding for yourselves if you'd like to read it. But I will say that even though I had some dislikes with the book, I highly, highly recommend this book. I think that everybody should read it. I think it's a really, really great book, and if you guys are wanting to get into more fantasy type books, or you're trying to get into Sarah J. Maas, I think that this is a really great book for you to start out with because it is the first in the series, and you guys don't have to read like an 8-book series like Throne of Glass. So I think that everybody should read this book, and I hope that you guys enjoy it. But if you guys have read it already, please let me know if you guys really liked it or disliked it down below without spoiling anything, of course. And yeah, if you guys plan on reading it, then let me know that as well. But again, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and if you guys haven't already, please subscribe. I would love it if you guys join the family. And I will also have my social media linked down below. And if you guys like this video, be sure to like it and hit the notification bell. But other than that, I will see you guys next time. Bye!